Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Rectified Podcast. My guest today is Trina, Assur, and Gabrielle Gomes, co founders of Dinner Service New York. And we're going to let them tell us all about it. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us. Excited to be here.
Yeah, same here. Let's start with the obvious question. What is Dinner Service New York? Is it like food? Is it a restaurant? Like, what is it?
It's a good question.
You'd
A
think
lot
it
of
was food.
you think it's food, and a lot of people have that. We actually have a store in New York City, and a lot of times people walk by and they're like, "Oh, a new restaurant," and then they walk in and they're hopefully pleasantly surprised that we're not. But we are actually a apparel brand. Our cornerstone is around sustainability, and so our approach to sustainability is really no plastics, no toxins in our production. Um, but the way that we build our designs is around up and coming artists, musicians, what we call cultural icons. And so what we do is we dig into their story and we create our designs and storyline of the garments around them. And that's where the name Dinner Service comes from. It's kind of the idea of everyone has a seat at our table. We're bringing, we're the host. We're bringing this new cultural icon to the table and sharing it with our audience and giving them an opportunity to sort of share their story through a totally different medium. But we're trying to create sort of like the feeling of community that you get around the dinner table. So that's where
Yeah.
Dinner Service NY comes
All
from.
right. And how did you come up with this idea?
It's been a long time in the works. I think so. We both went to college together. We met at the end of freshman year. And after college, we sort of professionally went our separate ways, but in very different industries. But we had always we'd always talked about, even as Trina was working in investment banking, I was working in the casino industry and the fashion industry. We'd always talked about wanting to create a business together. And the conversation was never squarely around apparel or fashion until
Yeah.
we had both come together at a company called Boll and Branch, where we both worked side by side, and we were like the 23rd, 25th employees there. And it was a mission driven online bedding, so sheets, home goods, textile company. And they had a strong mission around creating an ethical supply chain. And with my background in fashion, I had worked at Chanel for 5 years prior. We had just started, as we learned about how Boll and Branch had built their supply chain and the values that they had instilled in their brand. It really had inspired us to turn to the clothing industry, which was something that both Trina and I were avid consumers. I had worked on the business side of fashion, but not the creation side of it before. And we're both pretty scientific and business minded in our approach to things, as opposed to sort of left brain creative. But
Yeah.
we had done a tremendous amount of research and uncovered what, sort of Boll and Branch had uncovered in their development of their supply chain, and realized that the clothing industry really needed an overhaul and some disruption related to how things were being produced, the way that consumers are educated and learn about what goes into clothing. And so that's how we had sort of landed on the idea of creating a clothing brand. It sort of necessarily wasn't Dinner Service 4 years ago when we were conceptualizing it, but we had really set out initially to just focus on developing a supply chain that was rooted in the usage of no plastic, specifically no toxic chemicals in production, because what we realized is the majority of clothing produced today is made from polyester. So when you think about fast fashion, I think everyone knows that pretty much today. Brands like Shein, Zara, close to or over 95% of their clothing is made from actual plastic. Being polyester, the most common type of plastic fabric. And what that does is it leaches into our environment, it leaches into our bodies. So it's in the water we drink, the food we eat, the air we breathe. And then the toxic chemicals associated with developing that type of fabric, the chemicals that are used to finish it and dye it are leached into our environment. There's very little sort of regulation around how that waste gets treated. And so it just really, we realized it's having a devastating impact on the health of our environment, the health of, humanity and our ecosystem. And so we set out to root our production in using all natural, plant-based, non-toxic types of fabrics that use circular practices when possible. So, minimizing the usage of natural resources too, when we can, using cotton that is developed from regenerative farming as opposed to conventional cotton. And so that's really how we had set up to develop the supply chain. And then, going back to how we brought it to market really comes down to the fact that from what we knew about building a brand, helping Boll and Branch to develop their brand, we knew that we couldn't shove down sustainability down people's throat. And so we needed to find a way to develop the brand in a way that was fun, exciting, people felt connected to beyond just sustainability, because a lot of people weren't aware and didn't know the things that went into clothing production. And so that's how we had landed on the idea of creating these collaboration style capsules with artists that have, and all different sorts of culture icons that have, unique stories, inspiring stories for us to share. And kind of the way we see it is like, as Trina mentioned, we call ourselves dinner service because each one sort of lends itself a unique story and gives us an opportunity to present even our brand in a slightly unique and different way time and time again. So.
All right. I feel like you told the whole story. Like, I can't ask you any more questions. No.
Very important to us. And that was, we spent a lot of time researching and understanding what our version of sustainability was. So it's our passion.
Now we're gonna get into the details of that. Speaking of sustainability and how fashion is made, there's a lot of those big brands that you mentioned. They're really sort of greenwashing. They have their own category of like, this is sustainable, like, this is the sustainable line, or this is the green line. But then, in fact, if you dig deeper, it's not really that. However, it's still very cheap. And we all know that if you guys are producing something, it's not going to be as cheap because, first of all, you're smaller. Second of all, using all these materials are more expensive than, mass productions that are made, in a non-ethical way. So how are you countering that in what you're doing? It's sort of like a fight that you're fighting against like these big giants. So what are you doing to be able to like convince people like, no, this big brand is not really sustainable with their green line, but look, we do this and that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And obviously like one that we daily talk about and kind of try to figure out. I think like the way that we've built our supply chain is particularly finding ways that we can make our version of sustainability more accessible, meaning like particularly around price point. So what we try to do is create a variety of things that are available to the customer, but never trying to go into even that like affordable luxury price range. Like what we want is to make our clothing accessible to as many people as possible. And as we grow, and to your point, make more units, hopefully we'll be able to bring the prices down even more. But I think what our differentiating factor is around just the design. I mean, the one thing I think that has been helpful to see even from like the press that we've gotten is that people are gravitating to the fact that our designs are not just basics. I think there's a lot of sustainable basics out there. There's just a lot of basics in general. And there's obviously a place for that. But I think, by being able to differentiate our designs and make them unique, and not only that, but also limited edition, it makes it feel more special. They're more curated. They're more unique. They almost become like collector's items, but something then you can feel good about because they're also sustainable. So, when you think about vintage, if you're going to buy that like old leather jacket or whatever, it's still going to be pretty pricey, but that it's going to last. That it's like a timeless fashion like piece, and that the price is worth it. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is develop a
Yeah.
value prop for our garments that is, yeah, maybe it's a little bit more expensive than the typical item, but you're getting so much more value for what you're paying than just, a basic organic tee.
Yes.
And there's like a connection we hope the customer feels to the garment. So to like Trina's point about vintage, people often connect to the storyline. Oh, this is a old like World War II jacket, or there's a story that they feel connected to. Whereas with fast fashion, what you see in the way consumerism has gone with this cheap apparel is that people are wearing a Shein item one time and then throwing it out. And there's just zero sort of connection or intimacy at all with the clothes that
or the brand.
Or the brand that people are wearing. And so our hope is to like develop those stories in a way that people can resonate and
Yeah, what's for sure is that people who are buying from Shein are not the people who are buying from you. I'm pretty sure that they're more aware of everything that's going on in the world, and they're more conscious about the environment and the planet and all of these things. So for sure, you're not targeting the people who are buying a $2 thing that they're going to throw out the next day. So tell me a little bit, like either of you or both of you, you came from different worlds and then you're like, oh, let's do fashion, like sustainable fashion. And fashion is like a difficult world to get in. How is the reaction in your environment, like your friends, your family? Did they think you're crazy? You have this investment banking secure job, or all of those things? Like how did it go?
We'll probably both have slightly different stories. I'll say for myself, I definitely got the like, you're doing what? Like, why are you choosing that? And, I think what was interesting is when we started this, we did not think we were going to start with fashion. We actually thought we were going to start with still in the clothing world, but more socks and underwear, because we were like, okay, that is a place where, there's sort of scalability and, it just felt like there was like an entry point there. But after doing a lot more research, what we realized is this was truly the green space. It wasn't so much that, and this was a place we could actually make an impact with the messaging that we were trying to put out there. And so it was sort of, we kind of stumbled over it. And, the nature of startups, you're kind of like constantly pivoting to get to the place where, you end up. And so I think probably a lot of our friends and family were along for the ride. So they came through the iterations of like evolution of how it became what it is, including a name change that happened at the end of last year, which again, kind of got people being like, what's this? Down, you're like, nope, still clothes. Like, just trying to figure it all out. But the reaction was, everyone is supportive, of course, but, I think definitely it's like, there's a little bit of that, like, why did you do that? Yeah. Like you had it all. You had what you thought, what people want. You had security. Why would you go do this? And I mean, at the end of the day, we really feel passionately about it and we feel like we can, I think after going through the exercise of, building a supply chain and, developing our taste and figuring out what our version of design is and building the muscles that we've been able to build. It's evolved in a way that we're like, okay, we can do this. And sometimes we even surprise ourselves.
That's pretty cool. Gabrielle?
I think similar. And definitely I got a lot of, oh, that's interesting. And there's support, but I definitely, without them saying it, know exactly what they're thinking, which is kind of what I was mentioning, just kind of like, what in the world are you doing? And I think for me too, I struggled with, it was sort of a pride issue too. It was like, okay, I've always wanted to try this, but optically it looks ridiculous to people. And so for Trina and I don't want to speak for Trina, but it was like, we both came from these backgrounds, Trina has an MBA and we, are both educated and had these executive level positions, and we basically gave that all up. And so there was a period of time where I was almost like a little bit embarrassed to tell people what I do because it's like it's a lot to explain
Yeah.
without being able to have something to show for it. And so now I think we're finally in a position where we finally do have something to show for it. We're seeing growth. And so like the things are falling into place that we had always wanted them to. But
Mm,
it's been a journey. It didn't happen overnight by any means.
of course.
And we started it in the right as the pandemic had really hit. So
Yeah.
it was lots of change, lots of just
our plans
things-
were disrupted at every
lots
point.
of disruption.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
For
it's
sure. For sure.
It's constantly, oh God, is this the end? Is this today the last day? Or we have to go find new jobs now? So there's a lot of that
Yeah.
in this year. So
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of instability in entrepreneurship. And
Yes.
from the people who surround you in general, they only become like proud of you when you make it. But throughout your journey, which is the most difficult journey, that's when they're like, they criticize or they're, you don't know what they're talking behind your back, basically.
Yes,
But when you
that's
make
it.
it, they're like, oh my God, we're so proud. And this is my,
Yeah.
cousin,
I
and
knew
this is
you were
my
gonna
friend.
make
And
it.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So let's dive
Yeah.
into the business part now that we talked about, your personal life and how you came, how you are here today. Who was your first client who was not a family or friend?
Oh,
Like our first customer.
our first customer. Gosh,
Yeah.
I don't even remember. It must have been. That's a really good question. So our first collaboration was with a local jazz hip hop band based in New York called the Flamingos.
Okay.
And they were the perfect first partner because obviously
Mm-hmm.
there was so many kinks we had to work out in figuring out how to collaborate. We learned how hard it is to collaborate with a band because you have so many personalities and kind of like conflicting ideas that can be a challenge. But it helped us build our design muscle, and they were super patient. And it obviously took quite some time for us to like go from even having the first conversation with them to actually bringing everything to market. And so I would have to say the first customer is probably one of their fans because when they posted, I think they probably sent people to our page to buy. So I don't know
Okay.
exactly who it was, but it was probably
Yeah.
someone who was, yeah, it's a great question. It was probably someone who was like a viral fan of
Yeah.
theirs.
I always ask this question because I'm very curious. I know that at the beginning, your family, your friends, everybody's going to support you in one way or another. But then who is that first person who's like, let's take a chance on this brand and let's buy something, I'm always curious because that's the person who's like, I believe in you, like
Yeah.
let's buy from you, although they don't even know you, so they're giving you all that without even knowing you. So I
Yeah.
always like to see what happened at the beginning.
I-
So you
yeah,
talk.
actually, no, asking that question makes me remember a time, probably about, I want to say 8 months. So like a little bit, maybe, a year into our journey. And the beginning of our journey was a very slow trickle until really probably closer to this year when we did rebrand and really went stronger in terms of adding additional sales channels, i.e. retail and that sort of thing. But I was at a Broadway play with my husband and some of our friends, and my husband, I went to the bathroom and he comes back to me. He's like, "Oh my gosh, you have to see this. Do you see that lady over there?" And she was wearing one of our newest sweaters. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so crazy." It's kind of really the first time I'm seeing it totally
Yeah.
wild, total stranger wearing it. And then we were like, "Oh, we have to go talk to her." And I was in line for the bathroom, and he ended up going and talking to her, and he went up to her. He said, "I know this is strange, but I really like your sweater." And she's kind of looking at him like, "Who's this strange guy?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, it's my wife. It's my wife's brand." And she goes, "Oh my gosh, I've been following them since the very beginning. I bought so many
Wow.
things from them. I love their brand and what they're doing." So it was sort of like the first time that we had met, to your point, a stranger who had no idea who
Yeah.
we were, but just really appreciated the brand and what we were doing.
Yeah. Love this story. Such a great story. Um, so you talked about, collaborating with bands and artists, like not people who are really super known in the world, but people that have their own groups of followers. They're more niche. Well, we know that this is how you're marketing your brand. This is how you're spreading the word around your brand. But tell me a little bit more about the marketing part. So you collaborate with the band, and then what happens?
So we collaborate with the band, and there's a sort of a process, and it's become a lot more streamlined over. We've done this. We have about 11 or so collaborations under our belt at this point, and so
Hmm.
um, essentially the process is we to kick off the design process. We through the lens of like really getting to know them and what they feel connected to, what motivates them, what sort of inspired their journey. We use all of those elements. We get their input on, stylistic elements and sort of go through a mood boarding exercise. We then spend a few weeks in the sort of design bubble, mocking up designs, and then going back and forth with them around iterating and that sort of thing. And then we, go off, go into production. And through that time, we'll either work on content development, teasing out the story from the standpoint of like content that they create for us,
Yeah.
and content that we create ourselves. And then once the product's ready to launch, then we sort of go straight into promotion of it with the usage of this storytelling content that we've developed and
Yeah.
their organic content. And even the process around creating that content has changed for us, because what we've realized is we don't want to prescribe or dictate what type of content our collaborators should be creating. They are, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, we've chosen them because of their authenticity with their audience, and so we very much want that to come through in what they talk about as it relates to the collaboration. And so really the most success we've seen is really giving them very little direction and saying, okay, they will,
Yeah.
have a handful of posts that they promote through. It depends. If it's a touring artist, they may bring the collection on tour with them and sell it alongside of their merch. But really, at the end of the day, it's pretty organic in terms of how they talk about it, what they create. And I think the important thing is we just sort of establish that relationship initially so that they really can feel good about the values and really understand how we produce our clothing and all the values we stand behind. And then they can sort of share that with their audience in a
Yeah.
super authentic way. And that's kind of how we have seen success in spreading our sustainability message too, because
Yeah.
rather than, it's coming from a trusted source, i.e. the collaborator to their fans, as opposed to us. Just to your point, I think there's more and more consumers that are skeptical of greenwashing and credibility and that sort of thing. So that's kind of like from design through promotion, how it works. And then to date, we've never brought a style, replenished a style. So sort of like once it's sold out, it's gone. And I
Okay.
think it's the sort of thing that like customers don't really, I think a lot of brands talk about limited edition and want to admit it, but in the end they fall prey to like, this style sells really well, let's just keep making it. And we stayed hard and fast against doing that. And so now I think customers are finally starting to smarten up, because we've gotten lots of sort of inquiries about, oh, when is it coming back? And so, we tell them we don't bring it back. And now we're starting to see that like sort of like sell through window kind of shorten, and we're kind of bringing things back in.
Yeah, I like this. They're like they understood that it's really a limited edition and there's no restocking. So they're immediately buying it before it's sold out. And it also makes it more unique because not a lot of people will be wearing the same thing. It's really this limited amount of people who bought first. So I really like that. Also, the point of letting the artists be creative. Um, there's a lot of things. They're almost like your influencers, if we can say, for your brand. So there's a lot of things happening around that. I don't know if you noticed, like there are some brands who dictate word by word what the influencer
Yeah.
should do, and then there are brands who say this is the general idea, but then you be more like you do you basically, and this is where the magic happens because every single person has different ideas, and I really like that you have done that. Let's go back to the financial part. Did you had any like failed attempts and money wasted on things or tactics? You know, it's entrepreneurship. We all have that. So what happened with you?
Oh man, I would say there are a few different places that we've done. I mean, figuring out the right kind of collaborator was definitely probably the biggest challenge because
Mm,
we invest a lot. And when I say challenge, I mean I think we had a hypothesis and we tested a few things that didn't work. But I would say on the whole, we've probably gotten more wins than losses. And I think the one strong thing that comes through all of that is the design has been really good in every single one of the options that or every single one of the collections that we've dropped. And so I think because of that, we've still been able to sell through. It's just a matter of how long it
yeah.
took us to do that. But what we learned, and this was through total failed attempt, was that having an authentic connection with your audience is the most important thing. So
Mm,
if someone could have a lot of followers but not really have great comments or not really have great sort of like interactions on Instagram, it can just be a lot more surface level. That doesn't work as
yeah.
well as somebody who the comments are, oh man, I love you, or I love everything about what you stand for, or it's more personal, like the people who
Yeah.
transcend the platform and are able to have people feel like they know them in a very authentic
Mm,
way.
mm,
That's where the success really happens. And we definitely
yeah.
had a few where that was not the case. And that
Mm,
definitely, it was definitely harder to sell those capsules.
yeah.
And I would say we probably overinvested a little bit on the content side in the early days. So
Yeah.
we being the people that we are, and knowing how important content is, we were very
For brand
excited for
building.
brand building. And because we were building
Mm,
brand around storytelling, we were
yeah.
like, oh man, let's build documentaries, let's get a lot of video, and let's really try to
Okay.
figure out how to build these storylines that we can share. And ultimately, because of we didn't have the scale, we
Mm,
just had limitations in how far that could take us.
yeah.
It's also a really difficult and expensive medium to work with. So,
Yeah.
there was a little bit of recalibration after that.
It's like
Also.
we were creating that for ourselves
Yeah,
because we didn't have
exactly.
the
Yeah.
option.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
You were
was,
very ambitious.
yeah. And I think the future, we would definitely go back to that. But it's like
Mm,
in the interim, it's sort of like we have to figure out how to
yeah.
more efficiently do that. And I think that was a big, big learning for us too.
Mm, that's pretty cool.
No, I
So,
Yeah. No, I think that, yeah, those are the big ones, I think. I
yeah.
mean, of course, every day though, we face little
Y-
baby failures and,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
normal.
hiring the wrong people and, that kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
you have to be brave in terms of okay, I made a mistake, turn back,
Mm,
don't let
mm,
it suck you dry. I think that's kind of
yeah.
the biggest learning is just to know when to call your loss a loss and move on.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. For sure. What's next for Dinner Service New York?
Well, excitingly, actually, in 2 weeks, you're reading the preview, we are launching a new capsule with a hospitality partner, which is the first time that we have done that. So historically,
Mm,
we've worked with fine artists and musicians. Um, and now we are going and moving into the hospitality space. So there's a pretty famous pizza spot in New York. I won't say which one, but we're going to collaborate with them and we're dropping that in 2 weeks. So we're super excited about that. And I think
okay.
it reinforces the name, it reinforces the cultural element of our brand and sort of the iconic nature of it. And I think, there's other niche kind of cultural places that we want to get to next year.
Mm,
Niche sports, things like that we think could be really cool and interesting and create a really strong story and design. And so
yeah.
I think next year is going to be our big year of dropping sort of unexpected collaborations. That's going
Yay.
to be
Lots of them.
and a lot of them.
Amazing.
That's sort of our
Amazing.
doing for next year. But also I think, part of our mission, as we kind of mentioned, and as you can tell, we're so passionate about, like, is to proliferate the use of our materials. And I think wholesale is another place that we really want to get into, not so much in selling our garments to retailers, but more so in producing for artists and musicians to start out with, but even corporations and things like that, because we really believe like our version of sustainability is not that much more expensive than the next best or the next worst option, I'll say. And I think if we can bring that to the corporate level and start to produce for them in like mass quantities, it can really make more of an impact in a quicker way.
Yeah, yeah. This is so exciting. By the way, this episode, when it's published, the collection will be out, because you said in 2 weeks, but it's gonna be published more like later than the 2 weeks, so they can already get it. It's available.
Come back.
All right, we're towards the end of this episode, and I usually ask my guests 3 questions. You can each like reply to these questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. How would your friends describe what you do for a living?
Ooh.
I think most people in my world would probably say she makes sustainable clothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
I hate to have the same answer, but yes, I think
because they've been through the journey of discovery of like sustainability with us.
And I think that most people in my net circle too would associate it with like the arts too, and artist collaboration. So they make, sustainable clothing for artists is kind of what a lot of them know us by now, but soon.
And a lot of times I hear, oh, and it's way too cool for me.
Yes. Which i.e. means like they just don't have the appetite to wear something that's like all ordained.
Yeah. All right. Question number 2. What is one thing that your product did to someone that you didn't expect?
Product did to someone that didn't expect. We get emails from customers, and I can't say there's been like this overwhelming like moment of, oh my God, this person's life has changed. But, I think for me, the biggest thing is when we're in the retail stores and when we're there and we're able to talk to customers about sustainability and like why we started this and like the cornerstone, and you see someone's eyes kind of be like, whoa, are you serious? Like that learning moment, I think, has been probably the biggest.
Yeah.
And this was again, it was someone very close to me, but so it's not like a true random customer, but they said to me, my skin feels so much better when I wear your clothes. And I think that's ultimately what we want, is for people just to, be healthier because they're not wearing plastic on their skin.
Yes.
And feel it and feel good about wearing that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. Question number 3. Is there a book that changed your life that you would like to share with our audience?
Oh my gosh.
I'm a tarot. Oh, so the genre that I primarily read is nonfiction. So very dry. But the 2 books that are most notable for me are probably this. I have zero affinity or affiliation with the military, but is The Lone Survivor, and an autobiography about a female CIA agent. So,
ooh.
But Trina's more of a fiction. She's got more of a list of.
Oh God! I mean, what's funny is the name of the original company was the Phoenix brand. And that was named after the Phoenix from Harry Potter because of the idea of sort of similarity. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I'm actually rereading it right now. So like that's my fiction one. And I would say like in terms of books, I feel like it evolves. It's sort of like there's different phases of my life where different books have sort of had this sort of impact. I recently read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, and that was awesome and just so inspirational and sort of there was a lot of the struggle that he went through that we're kind of going through right now that I was like, okay, if he made it, we can make it too. So like, I think that was sort of very inspirational. So, I think like if you ask me again in a week, it'd probably be different, but
yeah, it's interesting. Many of our guests mention the shoe dog, like
It's a good
so
one.
many of them. Yeah, so many of them have read it.
Yeah, I
Um,
can't believe it took me this long to read it, actually. So,
mm, yeah.
good one.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us where people can find Dinner Service New York and how they can buy your products.
So we are online, www.dinnerserviceny.com, Instagram, of course. And then we have two retail locations in New York City. One is in Chelsea Market, and the other is our flagship store in Nolita, so 259 Elizabeth
Hmm.
Street. So please
All
come.
right. Yes. And do you ship like all over the
Yep,
US? Do you ship to
international.
Canada?
Yep,
Yes,
international
we ship
shipping.
worldwide.
International. All right. So it's not restricted to New York. You can buy it. You can buy it anywhere. All right then. Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. I'll be
And
back next week with a new
Thank you.
episode.